We're inundated these days with wildlife programmes. Sir David Attenborough has never been more popular. But one of the themes that we get from all of this mass coverage about the natural world around us is just how bad everything is. We're constantly being told that climate change means that the eradication of species will continue. It's always a miserable, bad news story. Well, here's a good news story. Here's something remarkable that is happening in the United Kingdom, happening right now. A story you might have seen a little bit of because over the course of this year, pictures have been appearing in newspapers of sightings of bluefin tuna in Devon and Cornwall. Well, I got to tell you, bluefin tuna are back in British waters. They're back in massive numbers, and boy, they are big. This is a great news story, an exciting story, and one with Brexit, if we exploit and use correctly and sustainably, can bring a lot of jobs, a lot of money, and a lot of joy into our country. If we go back to the early 1930s, the herring boats from Scotland would chase the shoals down into the North Sea in July, August, September every year. They started to notice some very, very big tuna were out there in the North Sea. And some pioneers, led by people like Colonel Cyril Frisbee, who'd won a Victoria Cross in the Great War, some pioneer anglers went out targeting and chasing these species. So much so, they started to catch some really impressive sized fish. The British Tunny Club was formed. And yes, it's true. It was a hobby for those that had money, for those that had time. But as tuna catches in the 30s began to grow, it really took off. Errol Flynn came across to Scarborough, to Whitby, to go fishing for bluefin tuna. John Wayne came to fish for bluefin tuna, as did David Niven, Charles Lawton, and many, many others. And lots of big fish were caught. The war, of course, was an interruption, but into the early 1950s, tuna were being caught, bluefins as big as 850 pounds. People out there in rowing boats with very, very primitive tackle where they were still catching these amazing fish. Then, largely, I believe, as a result of massive overfishing of North Sea herring, the bluefin disappeared and became a thing of history. I was fascinated by this from reading about it as a small boy. I even gave a lecture about it a few years ago at a get-together at the Game Fair. To my joy, about 20 years ago, bluefin started to be spotted off the Irish coast. And then, in the last few years, starting in Cornwall, but now spreading up the English Channel to the west of Wales, up to the northwest of Scotland, British bluefin tuna are back. Now, I've been out there, I've seen these fish, they're incredible. But to get to the bottom of this story of just how prolific a once endangered species has become and how many there are in British waters, I'm going to Cornwall. Well, don't take it from me that the bluefin are back in British waters in huge numbers. Let's go to somebody who really knows about this subject. Chris Gill is a Cornish fisherman from the delightful port of Mevagissey. He's the Assistant Secretary of the Cornish Handline Association. He's also a charter skipper running a boat called Aquila down in Mevagissey. He takes out anglers. He takes out people that want to see some of the great sights of the sea. Chris, tell me, as somebody who spends most of his life out at sea, when did these bluefin first appear?
About 10 years ago, we first started noticing the odd fish. But around 2016, they were here in really heavy numbers, hundreds and hundreds of fish to each shoal.
So if it's hundreds and hundreds of fish to each shoal, and if the shoals are being seen from the Scilly Isles, as far east as the Channel Islands, perhaps even parts of Dorset, I mean, we're talking here about a very, very large number of fish, aren't we?
A massive number of fish. They stretch all the way up to Scotland, down the western side of England and Ireland, right up through the south coast. I think they were seen right up as far as Kent. So massive, massive numbers.
So this is actually, I mean, we hear so many bad news stories, don't we, about overfishing and what's going wrong in the world and species decline. I mean, this is a massively good story.
It's an awesome story. It really is. Conservation, ICAT dropped their quota for the world down massively back in the early 2000s, and the stock recovery has been absolutely awesome.
ICAT being the international body that regulates and manages how many tuna are caught and how they're fished for. But Chris, this, I mean, for someone like Cornwall, and I know that the fishing industry is, how can I put it politely, not very pleased with the Brexit deal and has been through a tough few years. Has this boom in tuna numbers, has it been good news for Cornwall and the West Country?
No, not really. Purely for the fact that we haven't been allowed to target them neither in a recreational or a commercial fashion. So if we can open up the quota that we've now got because we're members, it can be. So it can be a really good...
So with Brexit, we're now members of ICAT, the international organisation. So we are now allowed, albeit the quota we've got for commercial landings is tiny, but what needs to happen? I mean, it seems to me, as someone that knows the West Country, that knows angling and anglers, it seems to me that in every port in Devon and Cornwall, there could be a couple of boats, you know, going out from August until perhaps even January, targeting bluefin. I think it would bring a lot of money, a lot of jobs into the West Country. What now needs to happen for us to get this fishery regulated?
DEFRA need to decide on where they're going to use this very small quota that we've got. I believe it's around 50 tonnes. If that's put into the recreational grounds for us to fish, with a live release fishery, so we return all the fish back to the wild, that's a massive number of fish. They estimate that there's a 5% mortality to these fish. So 5 in every 100 fish would probably die. Those should be brought in and sold on the market so that they're not let go to the bottom of the sea for the crabs to eat. 50 tons, if you're saying that these fish are 200 kilos each, which some of them are now, 10 years ago they were a lot smaller. They are growing at a phenomenal rate. These numbers could be huge for us, and the money that it could generate from tackle shops right the way through to hotels, restaurants, and ourselves as charter skippers.
Okay, so boom times could be around the corner for the Cornish fishing industry. We just need the government to do something, yeah?
Yes, we do. Yes, I mean at the moment we can't export our shellfish to Europe. There needs to be some diversification in the fishing. These fish have arrived. They've been here now for long enough for the scientists to know what's really going on, where they're coming from, and we should be targeting these fish now.
Right, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
So there it is. Huge numbers of fish around from August until early in the new year. The potential of this for Devon, Cornwall, parts of Dorset, West Wales, the northwest of Scotland, the tourist potential of a catch and release fishery is absolutely enormous. On top of that, equally there could be potential for a commercial market of landing fish dead on the slab in fish markets. But what really interests me is the catch and release fishery, the sustainability, the fact that 96% of all bluefin caught by rod and line will survive and go back and join the breeding stock. This is something managed carefully that could be transformative for many of our coastal communities. Those same communities who through the Brexit deal feel they have been dreadfully sold out by what happened at the end of last year. This is, albeit a tiny quota that we got from the Brexit deal, but it opens the door for us to have a big recreational fishery in this country. It will bring in not just British anglers, European anglers, they'll come to Cornwall from right across the world. We'll get Hollywood coming back wanting to fish for bluefin. It'll provide money, it'll provide jobs, and we'll do it sustainably, we'll do it environmentally. We can make an absolutely massive, huge success of this. So 2 things need to happen. The first is the government must get the application into ICAT by the 15th of February so that we have an internationally registered recreational sea fishery. Once that's done, we can start to give out licenses to those that are competent to do it. And the second thing is those tuna are there because they're chasing mackerel, they're chasing herring, they're chasing sardine, they're chasing squid. And the second thing that absolutely has to happen, and if we don't do it, could stop these bluefin coming back, we've got to stop the foreign super trawlers in the British Channel, hoovering up, boat by boat, up to 250 tons a day of bait fish. I want us to exploit our fisheries, our potential as an island nation, but to do it sustainably, to do it sensibly, to do it in a way that'll benefit not just us today, but generations to come. It is, I think, a fantastically exciting opportunity. It's something that could not and would not have happened without Brexit. Let's make it the most massive British success.